And now we'll dip into the archives. Inspiration for the nation at its best. George Kilpatrick, Inspiration for the Nation. We celebrate the positive achievements of African Americans from all walks of life, people that we feel good about. And if you're doing something positive, if you are doing something to uplift people and make them feel better about themselves, then we certainly want to talk to you. We're pleased to be joined by T.D. Jakes, Bishop T.D. Jakes. He is, of course, an author. He is a pastor, and he's an executive producer, film producer. His book is called Let It Go, Forgive So That You Can Be Forgiven. And we welcome Bishop T.D. Jakes to the program. How you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful, George. It's a pleasure to be with you.
I'm glad to have the opportunity to chat with you. And I tell you, when I think about forgiveness and I think about people that have done me wrong, people that have stepped in my way, I'm having a hard time finding it to let it go. So I know that you got some thoughts for me on how I might be able to let it go, because in some ways we are held in bondage to the thoughts that we have when we don't forgive people.
That's exactly right, George. The reality is, for us to harbor unforgiveness and anger and bitterness doesn't do anything to the person who mistreated us, but it does a lot to your health. It does a lot to your spirituality. It hampers your creativity. And to think that it does something to the person that you're angry against is logical as drinking poison and waiting on somebody else to die. The book Let It Go really drives home to you that forgiveness is a gift that you give yourself. It frees you up. It frees your mind, your energy, your passion. It makes you available to continue your life without the contamination and toxicity of what you've been through. It enables you to embrace your destiny without holding on to your history. And it just makes you a happier person. And all of us really want to be happier people.
I love how you said embrace our destiny while holding on to our history. And so much of what we are trying to do is move forward, right? But oftentimes that's the hardest thing for us to do. And what you do in the book, which I commend you on, is that you're not just putting this out on the surface. You're asking readers to go deep and really confront some things that they may have not even thought about in the past.
You know, that's the good thing about it. I didn't want to give them a Pollyanna book, or, why can't we all be friends and all of that sort of thing. I really wanted to do a comprehensive study as to how we develop a conflict resolution, how we interact with people, and how we resolve conflict and where it comes from. How we learn so much from the environment we grew up in, whether it's to slam the door and walk out, or whether it's to verbally attack the other person, or whether, however we handle conflict, and then to carry it. It affects how we do things on the job. It affects our most personal relationships. And I really wanted to do some real deep research. It's a learned behavior. It's not in children. Children can have an incident with each other and be ready to play in a couple of hours. You can chastise them and they'll hug you in a few minutes. It's not in children, it's in adults. It's a learned behavior. And if we learn how to get in, we can learn how to get out.
You talk about in the book an instance where you were cooking a little something on the stove and you took your eye off the prize, Bishop, and what happened?
Well, the whole skillet caught on fire, and in the process of me being a kid trying to get the skillet out, I dropped the skillet because it was on fire. It was burning my arm and ruined the new kitchen carpet my parents had just gotten. And my father was very angry about it, and my mother took the higher road of saying, what would you rather have burned, the rug or the child? And it's just an example of how you have to prioritize what you're going to be upset about. Sometimes we don't see the bigger picture because of the temporary inconvenience. And a lot of times we, as my mother would say, we end up cutting off our nose to spite our face. We do damage to ourselves because we don't see the bigger picture of what is more important. You ruin the relationship you have over the relationship you had. You bring preconceived ideas into your church or into your workplace. You won't pass on information to other employees because you want to make them look bad, and the company suffers loss, and you end up unemployed or downsized. It affects every aspect of our lives, and Let It Go is just a template to begin to discuss how you could live a better, richer life. And I'm not saying, George, that you don't get angry.
Yeah.
You're supposed to get angry. Anger is a gift. It's a gift from God. The Bible said, be ye angry. There's nothing wrong with being angry. There's something wrong with staying angry.
In fact, you write about this. We're talking with T.D. Jakes. Y'all know him as Bishop T.D. Jakes. He's a best-selling author. The name of his book is Let It Go, Forgive So You Can Be Forgiven. You write about anger as a positive emotion when channeled properly. You just don't want to hold on to it.
No. I mean, we need anger for fight, for flight. We need anger to establish parameters as what is and is not appropriate behavior for us. Anger is a blessing. It's a healthy emotion. But when that anger begins to rest, the scriptures say, don't let the sun go down on your wrath. It's telling you don't hold on to anger. And we do the absolute opposite. Even people of faith do it. We say that we've been forgiven, but we don't forgive other people.
I love that you brought in the idea of people of faith, because one of the things that's happening certainly in a lot of faith traditions is the type of people that we see coming in to our congregations, if you're in the Christian faith in particular. And I want to get to this idea of forgiveness, for example, in the context of a lot of what we see in communities across this country, of young men who have made mistakes, who have gone away, who come home, or people right now who are in the midst of their mistake. And we find it so difficult as a community and as a society to make amends, to forgive. We talk about love and we talk about having love and bringing people into redemption, but we sure do hold it against them because they don't measure up. Work me through that, because I think that's a critical issue. So many of our young people are coming home. They need a place, and they need to understand they need a place of love and acceptance. And oftentimes the very communities that birthed them aren't there for them.
Well, see, and that's a very sad reality. It's very, very true. I have the Texas Offenders Reentry Initiative, where we help to reduce the rate of recidivism by bringing inmates when they come out and helping them to assimilate back into society appropriately. And we have to understand that people make mistakes. Sometimes the mistakes that land them in incarceration, sometimes mistakes that end in divorce, sometimes mistakes that end up with terminations of jobs. And if we don't create a path for them to get back on track again, we are sending a message to our children and everybody else that if they ever did anything wrong, there is no grace. So they hide from us. They run from us. They don't connect with us because none of us live up to our highest ideals 24/7. And so there is a pathology that develops in the church, in the workplace, in all areas where people are just afraid to be straightforward about who they are or what they've gone through. When you forgive and when you overcome obstacles, people can be more open, they can be more transparent, they can be themselves, and they are more forgiving of you. We forget that when we slam the hammer down and make all of these judgments, that we have to live by the same rules that we give to other people. And sometimes when we're unforgiving of them, and then we later have a calamity, or our child has a calamity, we want everybody to be merciful. But the Bible said, blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. I would rather err on the side of being merciful than to be judgmental.
We're talking with T.D. Jakes. He is the author of Let It Go, Forgive So You Can Be Forgiven. And oftentimes, though, Bishop, we think of forgiveness as weakness, that you did this to me, and if I forgive you first, and it's like you got over on me. Now, walk me through that, because and then I'm going to take it a step further. Women.
Okay, first of all,
go ahead.
We do have a tendency to see forgiveness as weakness. We applaud people for animosity in our culture and our society.
Yeah.
We almost brag on them because they're hot-headed and because they spew out.
They don't take no stuff.
Yeah, right. That's like a real plus.
Yeah.
But what we don't know is that those people lay down with that anger. They sleep with that anger, that they have hypertension, that they have sleep disorders, eating disorders, that they run away future people who could love them because they are still full of animosity over the person who rejected them. There are all kinds of consequences with our children and why they can't talk to us. We have to create some atmosphere somewhere where you can really begin to rectify some of these issues.
You talk about that. So in that context, we have relationships where men and women find themselves in abusive relationships, for example. They find themselves in pain that that really tests families and their ability to stay together. Are you asking us to consider even the worst set of circumstances in order for us to be healed ourselves? Or are you saying there is a point where we have to draw the line? Or do we forgive in all circumstances? Okay, that's a three-part question. I get that, but walk me through it.
It's very simple. There's a difference between forgiveness and trust.
Okay.
I'm commanded to forgive you, but I'm not commanded to trust you. The onus of winning my trust back lays on the person who lost it. It's not my job to recreate trust. It's your job through consistent behavior. And I talk in the book about when you have hurt somebody, how you can win their trust back. It's not a death sentence. You can win trust back, but that's your responsibility if you're the perpetrator. Forgiveness and trust are two different things. The other thing that I think that's important to understand, I'm not saying that you should stay in an abusive situation. Because I think that when you are especially physically abused, you should flee out of that situation. But if you don't forgive that person, that situation continues to live in you. Yes, you can walk out the door on it, but until you get it out of your heart and your spirit, it continues to live in you, and you're abused over and over again. Every time you think about it, every time you see that person, every time you're in the mall and you run into them or the girlfriend or the one who took them from you, you're right back in that place again. So instead of them being incarcerated by the unforgiveness, you are incarcerated and thereby abused again. Forgiveness is a gift you give yourself. It has nothing to do with exonerating the person of their guilt or the responsibility. It just says, I will not allow what you did to become an albatross around my neck and curse the rest of my life just because of this moment in my life.
Let me ask you this then, in terms of this notion of where we are in our own mental health. And let me can I just get a little controversial with you? Because in terms of forgiveness, we go to the church and we ask the Lord to forgive us, those of us who go to church, I should say it that way. And yet, for some people, they're still not finding a healing. What happens when that's not enough and we're not addressing some of the critical mental health needs that, because, a lot of people think, let's say if they're in the Christian faith, Jesus is all I need. Well, sometimes you need a little something else along with that. Can you address that?
There's two things I want to point out. One thing to ask God for forgiveness, which you have to receive by faith and believe that when you pray that you have received. Excuse me. It's another thing to forgive yourself.
Okay.
And I think a lot of people struggle to forgive themselves, and I spent a chapter talking about forgiving yourself, allowing yourself the luxury of being a human, flawed though we are, and to forgive yourself when you have not lived up to your highest ideals, and I think that's very important. The third thing I'd like to say that I think is very critical to understand. We live in a world where we have almost no privacy. People are always looking in our windows. We're not sure when we email that somebody's not seeing it. We text and we're not certain. We don't have any privacy. People talk about everything you do every day of your life. The only place you have left of total privacy is in your thought life, in between your two ears. And if that is cluttered, then you have no place to go to refurbish yourself and replenish yourself, and that's why you go to bed tired and you wake up tired. You have no place to rest. And when you allow people to continue to live and what they did to continue to live and flourish in your mind, you are taking away the final frontier of privacy you have left.
Very powerful. So in some ways, we don't forgive ourselves, and you call that self-sabotage. And I love that because we need to move on from it, and that's how we let it go.
You would be surprised how many people would be far more successful right now if they weren't holding a grudge against themselves. Whenever they get in a situation that really would raise their lives or create opportunities, unwittingly and unknowingly, they self-sabotage themselves because they're still bitter with themselves and they don't feel like they deserve to be loved or they deserve to be blessed or they deserve to have a nice home. And so they self-sabotage themselves and sink back into the abyss of wherever they came from because they don't really allow themselves to be vindicated. They won't even let themselves out on parole. They've incarcerated themselves because of a bad decision, a bad mistake, or whatever that they've done in the past. And when anybody comes and wants to really love them, the reason they reject them is because they don't agree with that love. when somebody treats them good, they don't agree with that good treatment. And until you agree that you are worthy of the best, even though you've made mistakes in your life, you will drive away opportunities, jobs, people, anything positive because you harbor resentment against yourself. And this, to me, is the absolute worst because it is self-inflicted, it is self-sabotaging, and you can't stop the perpetrator because you're the perpetrator. You have to then go back in your own heart and really reconcile and bring to conclusion, bring some closure to where you came from so that you can release and to use a Christian colloquialism, be born again, start anew, start afresh, pronounce a benediction over the past and start afresh so that you can live the rest of your life without contamination from your past life.
I know that there is, and I think for me, that piece is probably the most powerful because you keep replaying the tapes in your own head. I mean, it's like a battle within, and then you're not forgiving yourself. Also, keeps you prisoner of your own thoughts and sort of you describe it as a cancer that doesn't help you forgive other people.
The reason I describe it as a cancer is that cancer is one of those diseases that you can have and not even know it. And so many people, they say, I don't have forgiveness issues, and they don't even know that growing inside of their own heart is this cancer-like toxicity that is contaminating their personality. They're stopping them from being the loving, kind, creative, thinking person that they were predestined and created to be. They don't even know it until they look back at their life and say, wow, I shouldn't have allowed that situation to have that much of me or that person to control me. Anytime somebody can walk in the room and their presence in the room can change your entire atmosphere, that's too much power to give to another person.
Finally, Bishop, what can we do as African Americans to celebrate the excellence of who we are and to remind ourselves and our communities that there's greatness within us, despite some of the bad news and negative stories that we hear? How can we celebrate the best of who we are?
Well, there's a lot of things that we can do. We can't give up on each other. We are the people that we've been waiting on, and we have to understand we have black people that have risen to the upper echelon of society, but we have a responsibility to go back and get others, to introduce new people, to mentor people, to train people to do what you do. I think we would really benefit from apprenticeship programs where people who have skills, have jobs, have entrepreneurial opportunities, that we begin to train other people so that they can duplicate what we do. Most cultures in our society that have been successful, that are minorities in this country, have been successful because they mentor each other. And the mentorship is basically one person bring one. I think that's important. I think that we ought not be so quick to give up on each other, our families, our dreams, our friends, our neighbors, just because we find that they're not perfect. And if we can do that and salvage one another's circumstances, we will lose the mentality of they and them coming to save us. I really believe that we are the people we've been waiting on and that we have to do it ourselves and assume responsibility to raise ourselves up so that we have the same balance and opportunities as other Americans in this country. Some of the onus rests upon us. Some of the onus rests upon the system and the corruption that exists in the system. But even when we run into those cases of corruption, we can't allow that to thwart our dreams or end our goals or kill our ambitions. We just have to swing harder, get huddle back as a team, and develop another methodology whereby we can break some of the bondages. This has been a rough period for minorities, economically, academically, maritally. We've taken some blows in some incredibly significant areas, but we are strong, resilient people. We survived slavery, we survived Jim Crow, and we'll survive this too.
And that success is in our DNA. Talking with T.D. Jakes. Bishop T.D. Jakes, Let It Go is the name of the book. Forgive so you can be forgiven. You know, one of your books, Reposition Yourself, Life Without Limits, I wonder how you get it all done.
You know, I'm a very strategic person. I've got a great staff. I delegate quite well, and I'm a workaholic, unfortunately. And all of that together helps me to get a whole lot done in a little bit of time.
Let me ask you this. What inspires you?
People, God, life experiences. I meet so many amazing people. I learn something from absolutely everybody I meet. and it just becomes a warehouse for thought and ideas to use for movies or books or even for developing my own wisdom and understanding about life.
You know, that approach seems to me that you don't, and a lot of people say, oh, this is Bishop T.D. Jakes. He's got it all going on. And it would appear to me that people wouldn't see you as still learning, still humble in what you do. That's a lesson for some people.
Oh, listen, I'm learning every day. And not only learning, I mean, I'm very, very human. And I think one of the worst things you can take away from a person is their right to be human. I'd rather you take anything else from me. You know, we talk about the divine, but we are not the divine. And so I'm ever learning and ever goofing up stuff and learning from the mistakes I make, like everybody else. And I think that's what makes you an effective communicator, because you can relate to people where they are. You're not above them. I'm one of them.
You talk about making mistakes and still learning. What is your biggest fear? A lot of people don't think that people of your stature have fears. What is your biggest fear, and how did you overcome it?
Wow. Well, when I think of fears, I think of several. One thing, I'm afraid of heights, and I've never overcome it. I'm still afraid of heights. I think my biggest fear is to live and die and not accomplish the things that I set out to do. And I think the reason that is a big fear is because my father died at 48. And so I learned early, I was 16 at the time, I learned early the brevity of life, and that life is very, very short and not promised to anybody. And he spent 8 years of his life sick, really sick unto death, and then died of kidney failure. And it shaped my thoughts as a youth, and I think it has a lot to do with who I am today as a man.
Do you know that is something that we share in common? My father died at a very young age, and for the same condition. It was renal failure. And then, of course, that led to other complications. I didn't know that.
Well, yes, he did, and I grew up dialyzing him on a kidney machine, and I grew up in those kinds of environments. And my greatest birthday was not my 50th, it was my 49th birthday. Because when your father dies at an early age, you live with a cloud over your head that you're going to do that too. And I think the reason I was such a workaholic was I was racing against the clock because that cloud was hanging over my head.
Well, okay, so I'll tell you, my birthday has to be the 58th when that comes. That's when I'll do the dance that you just did.
Not a problem.
but you talked about racing against the clock. Many of us need to realize that we don't have as much time as we think, and today is the only day that we have.
You know, I think it's a very important fact and a strong feature, and I've been ministering since I was 19. And one of the things that happens, there are different incidents that happen along your life that make you realize that life is but a fleeting vapor. And a lot of people react to that in different ways. Some of them become more toxic in their behavior. Some of them become extremely moral and heavenly focused in their behavior. What I really try to do is strike a balance, not going to either extreme. Some people are so spiritually deep that they're not grounded in reality, and I don't want to do that. On the other hand, I don't want to become so obsessed with trying to get every thrill-seeking moment out of my life that I'm not responsible. So to me, the real art of life is to be balanced and not to go to either extreme, and I try to do that. Some days better than others, but I try to do that.
When you started out, did you imagine, and maybe you'll say yes, you did, but did you imagine that you would be where you are today, or how did you imagine that you would be where you are today?
I did. I caught glimpses of my future at 8 years old. I hate to use this word, but for lack of a better word, premonition. When I was 8 years old, I went to hear my mother speak at a sorority, and she was a Delta, and she had just spoken. I said, right now I'm going to hear you speak. And they called me Miss Jake's son, but the time will come you'll come to hear me speak. They'll call you Tom Jake's mother. And I caught just a glimpse of it, but I didn't know it would be preaching, and I didn't know it would ever be on this scale. T.D.
Jakes, really gracious with us, and we certainly do appreciate that. The name of the book, by the way, is Let It Go, Forgive, so you can be forgiven. And, of course, you can check them out on TV, on radio, in the theater near you, and at the Potter's House in Dallas, Texas. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
George Kilpatrick, Inspiration for the Nation, hitting the archives to bring you a very special conversation. Keep it locked right here. More coming up. Inspiration for the Nation.